Welcome to another episode of the Your Longevity Blueprint podcast. Today, my guest is James Berry. His 16 plus years in the culinary field started as a private chef. His inauguration into restaurant style cooking came later when he was a vegan vegetarian chef on the Van Warped tour, which traveled to 50 North American cities in 60 days. Upon returning to Los Angeles, James continued to private chef, and he had the fortune of cooking for celebrities like Tom Cruise, Mariska Hargitay, George Clooney, Gerard Butler, Sean Puffy Combs, Barbara Streisand, and John Cusack. Not wanting to limit the audience of his healthy and tasty style of cooking, he started Wholesome to Go, a healthy, high-quality food delivery company that served under his leadership in the Los Angeles area for 8 years. Most recently, James launched his first functional food product, Pluck, which we're going to talk about today, an organ-based all-purpose seasoning. It's the first of its kind, and it's an amazingly easy and delicious way for people to get organ meats into their diet. He also co-authored the recipes in Margaret Floyd's book, Eat Naked, and co-authored the follow-up cookbook, The Naked Foods Cookbook. He most recently co-authored the recipes in Dr. Alejandro Younger's book, Clean 7. You can follow James on Instagram and Facebook at Eat Pluck, and get your nutrition in a pinch at eatpluck.com. So welcome to the show, James.
Thank you so much for having me.
You have quite the story, so tell us more. So tell us what inspired you to become a chef.
Well, it started when I was 7, and my mom, who is not a chef at all, I mean, she's constantly amazed that she has a chef for a son. She taught me how to scramble an egg, and I don't know, there was something about it that I just fell in love with it. But what's so funny is that I'm in junior high. I think it was around sixth grade, whatever age you are when you're in sixth grade. I think you're what, 11 or something like that.
Sure,
I
yeah.
don't, I don't even remember. But so I'm in sixth grade, and they're offering culinary arts class, cooking class. And I immediately gravitated to it, and I loved it so much. And I was never like an A plus student. I was, kind of a B student. I really loved more the social aspects of school than the scholarly. And culinary class, though, I soared, and I loved it so much that my mom had to go to the school and ask them specially if they would allow me to take it twice. So I took it during the day as a normal class, but then they offered it after school, and I got to take it then as well. So I was unique in that way, and I just loved it. And I still, Marilee Dunn is the teacher's name. I still remember her. I thanked her in my first cookbook, and I loved it. And I think I loved it because cooking for me was an expression of love. And I have a caretaker in me. And I think I look at cooking as, this is how I can show you I love you or care for you. And yeah, so it started at a very young age. But what's so funny is that here I am in sixth grade, and I'm like, oh, well, I can't become a chef because they have to work at nights and own restaurants, and I'm a family man. I'm like 12 years old, and I'm like, I'm a family man. I don't know where that came from, but for some reason at that young age, I was convinced I cannot do this as a career. And so I just chose to do it as a hobby, and I just continued to learn as much as I could until 9/11 happened. And 9/11 happened. At the time I was living in Los Angeles. I was an actor, and I was working very hard at that, and writing and trying to produce plays, and just trying to just get my creativity out there as an actor as much as possible. And 9/11 happened, and I just kind of audited my life, and I was like, I I love acting. I love it, but it doesn't feel like it's the end of the road. It doesn't feel like it's the thing I'm truly on this earth to do. And I was just looking at everything, and I was like, well, I really want to make sure I'm doing things. The only things in my life are the things that have heart. And I'm like, well, acting, I like creativity, but it's not it. And I was like, well, but I love cooking. I'm like, maybe I should go to culinary school. And no joke. I mean, it was at that point, I then started looking into schools. I think I started raising money because it was really expensive. I didn't have a lot of money at the time. And so a year later, I was in culinary school in New York. I picked this school because I knew I wanted to be a private chef. I didn't want to work at a restaurant. I knew I wanted to work one-on-one with people and to help them with their health. I was really intrigued with the idea of comfort foods that could be made healthy.
Love that.
Yeah. And so I came back from New York, and this is kind of fun. It was the first time in my life where things just kind of clicked. I'd been putting 200% out in acting and maybe getting back 35%, But with cooking, I put out 100% and I got back to 100%. I mean, people were coming to me and I have no idea how. It was really magical.
Awesome. I'm going to have to ask you later when you say you made comfort food healthy. I'm going to have to ask you for some recipes. You have to share some
Yeah, well,
secrets with us.
I think, COVID really shined a light on this, right?
Yeah.
Like we can talk health day in and day out. I mean, all your listeners, you lay out wonderful blueprints of how people can get healthy. But when, the stuff hit the fan, what happened? Alcohol sales went up. Everything that's addictive basically increased in sales. And that's because we are emotional, right? And a lot of times our emotions are dictating our choices. And it's sad to me that the alcohol sales went up, that desserts and sugar items increased in sales. And like, I mean, I just remember seeing the bins. I live in Portland, Oregon, and I remember seeing the bins, the recycling bins, and they were, no joke, overflowing with alcohol
Wow.
bottles, just
Wow.
overflowing. And it wasn't just like a couple houses, it was like all of them. And so what it showed me, or at least how I saw COVID, was, okay, so we can talk health all we want, but when it
Push
gets
comes to shove. No, yeah.
yeah, push comes to shove, we're going to go to what we know. And so that told me that the future of health is not necessarily in figuring out what the magic pill is. It's actually figuring out how we can take the tried and true health habits, that already exist, like taking nature's gifts already that are already there, and somehow making it so that we don't have to establish new habits around it. Because if we have new habits, it's going to be more challenging to achieve. I think New Year's is a proof of that, right? Because every New Year's we make all these resolutions, but no joke, 80% of them are done by February. So they barely last a month. And
Sadly. Yeah.
yeah, right. So to me, if we can make health changes but not require a new habit, then we've got something. And that's kind of now my goal.
Well, I like that you help with the house. So we're going to have to talk about that. But first, I think as part of your story, I want to go back to some health challenges you have had. And so do you mind sharing those and maybe how cooking helped?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone in the social fields and the health fields has a story of how, and it usually starts with I got sick
Yep.
or some kind of event
Right.
happened that propels you into, okay, I need to get better. Oh, this is what worked. Now I want to share it with the world.
Hmm.
And for me, I got a kidney stone and I
I've
was
had one of
just
those
out of
too.
college.
Yeah.
Oh, you had? Really?
Oh, it's
From
terrible.
pregnancy or
Oh no,
how did you get
right
yours?
before I got pregnant, actually. I'll tell my story after yours.
Okay, because I want to hear yours. So I got a kidney stone right out of college, and I was 3,000 miles away from my family and home. I was at this. I was doing this summer program, and I had just arrived there about 2 weeks after college, and got a pain I'd never experienced before. And as you know, it's not as painful as probably having a child, I'm told, but it's probably the closest you can get.
It's bad.
And
Yeah.
it was terrifying. Yeah, it was terrifying. And basically I got to the hospital. They said, well, it's either an appendicitis or it's a kidney stone. And then, I got my drugs to basically ease the pain, and then it passed and we discovered it was a kidney stone. And the first thing I asked was to see it. When I saw it, they said, how did I get that? Like, what is that? And the doctor
Yeah.
said, well, what have you been eating and drinking? And I was like, what? Like, what does that have to do with anything? He's like, well, tell me. I said, well, I was eating pizza every day and I was drinking root beer. He's like, well, were you drinking any water? I'm like, no. He's like, well, what you put in your body is going to affect it. And I was like, huh? I mean, I was like, I was 19 and I really did not connect that what I ate resulted in my health, like was going to have a direct correlation to my health. And from that day forward, I carry water around everywhere.
Yep.
And that was truly the pinnacle of starting to rethink, like, oh, what
How
am
I
I
eat
choosing to put
matters.
in my body?
Right. Right.
Yeah. And it's really, I mean, you can attest to this, I'm sure, like it's alarming how many people still don't connect those dots and how many doctors do not connect those dots.
Hmm.
It's scary.
Most patients who come to see me have seen multiple other specialists, none of which have ever once asked what they're eating, including their gastroenterologist. So, yeah, it's very sad. Yeah. My kidney
Yeah.
stone,
Yeah.
short story here for the listeners, but my kidney stone, I don't think happened because I wasn't drinking plenty of water. I think I was drinking lots of water, but I was not supplementing with K2 and I was taking a lot of D3. I think that helped precipitate it. And I was taking a lot of N-acetylcysteine to help with fertility, actually, but you can actually make cysteine kidney stones. And long story short, I actually had to have surgery to remove my kidney stone, and I never want to have that happen ever again. But I also was on a
Which
rather
is,
high oxalate diet. I did a lot of smoothies, and which I still am an advocate for, in reason. I think everything needs to be done in moderation. I think I was eating way too many oxalates, so I needed to modify my diet a bit there too. So that's the short end of my story. But it was extremely
were
painful, and
you
I wish.
putting
Go ahead.
were you putting the raw spinach in your smoothies and all that stuff?
Kale, love
Yeah.
kale and spinach. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And eating
That's the
salads
thing a
almost
lot of
every
people
day
don't
as well.
realize.
So yeah. So having the smoothies,
Yeah.
having the salads every day, yeah, yes. But back to your story. So obviously you had this epiphany where, hey, I actually can go to culinary school and I can work in this industry and not have to be working, late hours. I can be a private chef. So I'm sure the listeners want to know what it was like being a private chef at the start. And I want to know if they eat healthy or not.
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of look at myself as a guinea pig because one of the first things I realized when I arrived, so as you mentioned, I specialized initially in vegan vegetarian food, and I didn't necessarily do that because that was my diet. I did that because I wanted an edge. I knew that if I
Sure.
specialized in something, then I would set myself apart from other chefs.
Yeah.
And also I was exploring what is healthy. I didn't have an answer to that. And vegan vegetarianism, which is now what called plant-based, right? It's like they keep changing the terms, but the reality is back then that was seen as a healthier diet, and it probably still is to many people. But I was really exploring. Like I was like, okay, what is health? Like what does it mean? What is true health? Because you're being as you point out for your podcast, the trends are abundant, right? We're constantly being chattered about what is healthy, but what is truly healthy. And I think um, that turned me into a bit of a guinea pig because I was needing to cook for clients that were into all the hottest trends. So when I first got out of school, it was the Fat Flush book. That was the big one, Fat Flush book. And so I had to quickly read that and understand how to cook for it because I was getting asked to cook fat flush food. And I was like, okay. But that's really, I think, my most prevalent comment I can make about celebrities is that they are passing in amongst the community. They are passing around whatever the newest trend in, and sometimes it's a trend that hasn't even hit the mainstream market, that it's kind of an internal trend. I think that's how the what's it called, that that detox where you do lemon juice and maple syrup,
A gallbladder flush
that,
sort of thing. Yeah.
well, but there's a special term, a name for it, and that actually started in some of those communities. But um, I became a guinea pig basically, and I just started trying everything and anything just to understand it, but not just in a cerebral way. Like I needed to understand how to cook for it
Right.
and make the food interesting and make it feel like my clients were not being deprived. So I became a bit of an expert in that. And to this day, I mean, if you have a, MRT list that's, crazy long, I can usually, in most cases, I can show you how to cook with it and not feel deprived, how to make it feel so that you're getting all the foods all the comfort from the foods that you can eat that you would hope for.
So I'm mostly dairy free, and I say that and that I had been gluten free for years, and I truly believe I had to go dairy free in order to conceive my first child. I think that dairy was contributing to my endometriosis, whatnot. So I say I'm mostly dairy free, and that over the holidays I had some dairy. I did have some pecan pie, which had some had some butter in it. But other than someone's birthday, right, I'm not consuming dairy. So I'm not vegan, I eat eggs. But for our listeners, like when you were cooking for those who were vegan, like, can you give us a couple tips or tricks, or that you use some pearls that we may not be aware of that were popular for you to use?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's interesting about, and I'm curious if you found this with butter. There are so many people I've worked with off dairy, but yet they can do butter. And it's a constant, debate really about it
Yeah.
is, can people that need to be off dairy still do butter due to the high fat content? I mean, there's just so many,
Yeah.
but do you find that even butter affects you?
Yeah, so dairy doesn't affect me per se. Like I don't have gastrointestinal symptoms, whatnot, but I do believe it was triggering inflammation in my uterus, right? The endometriosis. So many of my patients for their conditions, regardless if they don't feel symptomatic eating the butter, the dairy, I'm going to take them 100% off dairy for at least. I follow kind of what Terry Walls recommends, also from Iowa, that 100% for 100 days. So at least 3 months, I do take patients entirely off all dairy, any casein anyway, like entirely off. And then I let them introduce, and they're certainly introducing things like butter first before they would ever get to
Right.
something like milk, or have dairy in a baked good at least before they would be.
And
So
how stringent do you get around like ghee, for example, where the dairy has been removed?
depends on how sick the person is.
Yeah.
But usually I do say ghee is allowed, the
Yeah.
clarified butter. Yep.
I mean, let's be honest. We are, I've been in this field for over 16 years, right? And where we are now in the world, the number of options are incredible,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there's that dairy-free substitute that my wife, because she's dairy-free as well, that just loves, is it
Yoko's, love
Miyoko's
that brand.
butter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a pretty clean butter, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
for a dairy-free butter, because that's the thing I always look at is what is in the ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
And you look back in the day when we were even younger, like margarine, for example, like that is a scary concept, because what they were doing was they were putting flavoring in margarine to recreate the butter experience, right? But all the ingredients that were in that margarine were really bad. I mean, like they were really, really bad for you. And I think you still see that in so many so-called health foods now, that like actually you see it a lot in the Impossible burgers and all those kind of things, is they're trying to sell you on this idea that this is better for you. But if you just read the ingredient list,
Mm-hmm.
it's scary. It's
This
not,
long. Yeah.
yeah, it's huge. It's not recognizable. The question I always ask is this something found in nature, or is it not? And if it's not, does that mean my body's not going to be able to assimilate it and understand it? And usually that answer is it won't.
My
I mean,
husband and I talk about this a lot because he is not free of really any foods. He eats whatever he feels like, but he has problems with a lot of these alternatives because he feels like their ingredient list is 2 paragraphs long and has things that aren't from nature. Whereas butter, like organic butter or ghee, he's saying this has got to be healthier than some of these alternatives. So you have to find the clean alternatives. I mean, you
right.
really do.
And I mean, we live in an age where they exist, I mean,
Yep.
there is even like a non-dairy, most of the non-dairy based ice creams, for example, are really not good. I mean, if you once again read the ingredient list, they really aren't good. However, I've recently seen some brands that when you read the list, there's like 4 ingredients, 5 ingredients. You're like, oh, finally someone's doing it. Like, and I can't even tell, I don't even remember the name of the brand, but if you just read the ingredients, um, you immediately can kind of dial in, is this going to be good for me or not? Or is this
Yep.
going to be a good substitute for the real, the full dairy one?
Sure.
But in terms of some tricks, like, so here's one that it has nothing to do with dairy, because I really do think there are some great non-dairy options nowadays,
Sure.
right? I think Nut Pods, for example, is a good
Yeah.
good option, and that's a wonderful company in terms of their mission. And um, but here's a tip that a lot of people don't realize. So a lot of times you get in your MRT back and it says, like you can't do lemons, for example, and everyone's like, oh, what do if I can't do lemons, and sometimes you can't do limes. Well, sumac is a spice. It's a Mediterranean spice, and sumac it's not a mixed spice. It's an actual spice. It's a seed spice that has a lemony taste to it. So that's
Never
just
knew that.
one example of like, if you
A
can't
hack.
do
It's a hack.
lemons,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a little hack of like, just use sumac. And there's tons of stuff like that. Like can't, and some of the stuff is now popularized, but I was doing this stuff a long time ago. What, like the use of cauliflower for grains and for thickeners. Like when I make curry sauce, for example, I thicken it with cauliflower. So I'm making the curry and I use whole cauliflower florets and I just let them simmer in the sauce and soften, and then I blend it and it just naturally thickens the sauce. So that's a good hack if you can't use coconut, for example.
Yes, that's
Use cauliflower.
frustrating when that comes back on a patient's food sensitivity test. Can't have coconut. I know that can be really frustrating. Speaking of
Yeah.
cauliflower, I have another question for you. So we'll come back to our agenda here but for a moment, we were gifted an air fryer
Yeah.
from our
Very
in-laws.
popular now.
Yes, and I love chopping up cauliflower and broccoli and tossing that in an oil. So I guess I would ask, what oil would you recommend to be used in the air fryer? And is the air fryer healthy? I mean, is
Yeah.
that okay, or I haven't, I mean, the food tastes delicious, but is that something we should be using, or what is that
Well, it depends on
doing to
what
our
your
food?
definition. Yeah, it depends on what your definition of health is. So it's if you know, because when people say that, they could be saying, well, is it healthy to fry food, right? And of course, it's not. It's not healthy to fry food in any clean oil. It's still not healthy because
Sure.
just the act of frying the food, deep frying it, is going to make it unhealthy. Um, it's gonna change the molecular qualities of the food, and so it's not going to be as healthier. Now that's the kind of cerebral terms, right? But does fried food taste good for the soul and like emotionally? Heck yeah, right? People like there's nothing better than something like that, particularly if you grew up eating that, right? So in that sense, a air fryer is miraculous because you're not having to deep fry it, so you're gonna
Right,
get it's gonna be healthier just in
right,
general, right? Now the the thing with like the pressure cookers and the deep fryers, I think ultimately I think the technology is really great. I think it makes things that used to be a little bit more complicated and or unhealthy healthier, in the case of air fryers. But the question becomes like, well, I guess it's really a thing of preference and then of time, because sometimes people mistake and they think these things are going to make it faster to cook. It doesn't necessarily do that. Like if you were making rice in a pot, for example, versus let's say a pressure cooker, right? It takes 15 minutes for the pressure cooker to pressurize, right?
right, right.
So that 15 minutes, and
You
then
could have
yeah,
just cooked the rice. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, and then it takes 10 minutes for it to cook. So that's 25 minutes. And you could have easily done that in a pot. And then the same kind of similar concept you can add to air fryers is, well, are you now eating all of your food in the air fryer? Is it all that same texture? And does that mean it's unhealthy? Not necessarily. But you are like, what kind of oil are you using? Because you still have to use some oil in the air
Right.
fryer, right? So what kind of oil are you using, to your point? And I technically, if I ever fry anything or even coat something to bake, I really stick to, I think it's about 5 oils or 5 fats. So I do lard, I do ghee, I do tallow, I do duck fat. Duck fat is amazing on potatoes. Amazing duck fat. And it's almost like duck fat was meant to be used with potatoes. When you taste it, it's like they just go so well together. But so duck fat, and then coconut oil. That's really it.
Sure.
Anything else, and it's questionable. Vegetable oils, it's inflammation. I mean, and a lot of these oils are highly processed,
Yep.
with chemicals you don't want in your body. So I usually try to keep it to those kind of solid at room temperature fats.
Yep.
And then the issue becomes, well, um, I don't know if you're always eating like that. That's really that's where the debate is, right? I think it's great to get saturated fat. I think I'm very pro fat, but you can have too much fat. It's like when I'm like during my kicks of trying to kind of lose weight, I mean, I eat so, like right now I'm doing a carnivore diet and I'm just kind of
Are you really?
experimenting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm 24 days in, or actually 25 today, and it's just an experiment. I'm doing it for 3 months to try. And
Are you checking labs before and after?
I should have. I know. I didn't do it before. I I wish I had, but I am going to do it during. And I have some labs from about a year ago that I could compare it to,
Yeah.
but I didn't do it right before. Um, but point is like, even on a diet like this, it's so restricted to just animal products. I'm not eating anything else outside of it. And I still have to be mindful of fat. I have to be mindful of fat in terms of making sure I get enough, but also make sure I don't get too much, because
Right.
it can negatively affect your health. So I think that goes for any cooking method. And then lastly, I think we never want to forget aesthetics when cooking. So flavor is key. Flavor is king, right? You always want it to taste good, but aesthetics are important too. We can get tired of, like, I think anyone who grew up having boiled vegetables can attest to this. Like it affects how they look at vegetables as an adult, right? It affects, like, oh, I don't like Brussels sprouts. I hear that all the time. I don't like Brussels sprouts. Well, how were they cooked when you were a kid? Oh, they were boiled and it was lime green and it was disgusting. I said, well, have you tried them uh, roasted? No. Well, maybe you'd like them. You know what I mean? Like, so
Hmm.
sometimes when we fall into just the same aesthetic of the food, the same style of cooking, it can sometimes get boring. And I think it
Yeah,
kind of puts food sometimes at a flat line. So I
agreed.
like to mix it up. I just like to mix
So
things
I
up
can
as much
use
as
my air
possible.
fryer with the appropriate fat occasionally, just not every day.
Yeah, I think so. Unless you're, I mean, unless you're on a kick where you're just like, you're loving it. I mean, I think it's really, we cannot underestimate the
Not gonna
importance
lie, yeah,
of,
when we started using it, we used it like every day for a week, but then we got off
yeah.
got off that
And
kick. But it,
I think it's really important to not underestimate energy with food. The energy of the intention of when you're making it, but also, like, if you're loving something, there is plenty of data to show that actually you're digesting it better when you're kind of feeling good about it or positive towards that what you're eating. It could be even something that's not good for you, but if you're eating it and your mind and your energy is clean about, like, oh, this is, I can't wait to eat this, and it's positive, there is plenty of data that will show you that actually it your body assimilates it differently than if you were sitting there, tight and stressed out about it, like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this and I'm hiding it, and like shame is filled,
sure,
with you
sure.
eating. So there's lots of data around that. And what is that movie, like Water for Chocolate? Like, I think where they talk about the energy you put into the food you make. I'm a full believer of that.
Love that. So let's go on to some common mistakes that you've seen in your years working as a chef. So what are some common mistakes that you've seen?
Yeah, I so this is going to be a tough one for people, but it's the number one thing I've seen, and that's self-assessment. I
Hmm.
think I think particularly with Mr. Google, and just the ability to have so much information at our fingertips. I constantly see people self-assessing and thinking they know why they can't do something. Like, I know someone from my childhood that self-assessed, and so she hasn't eaten, I think, eggs and a bunch of other stuff, and this has been now like 30 years. And I hear stuff like that and I'm like, huh, but you don't actually know why you're not eating this stuff. She said, no, I just know I feel better. I'm like, okay, but did you actually heal anything in the process of removing it?
Hmm.
And she has no clue because she never actually did the test. And that's one of the reasons why I love, the work of practitioners that are not just removing things, but they're also focused on the healing. And
Hmm.
I always try to tell the self-assessors, I'm like, most health protocols are 3 to 6 months,
Hmm.
and you've been doing this for 30 years. Like, you could be limiting so much of your diet for really no reason. You don't even know. And once again, I just go back to life is short. Like, if you don't have to limit something, why should you? But if you
Hmm.
have to, then let's
Right.
figure out how to do it.
Agreed.
So self-assessment, I would say, is the number one thing. And then the second would be this idea that we have to be good at cooking. I think there's this concept that because we need to eat, we expect that we're all supposed to love cooking and that we're supposed to be good at it and we're supposed to want to do it. And just in my time as a chef, it's just not true. For most people, the majority of people, they do not enjoy cooking. It's fuel to eat, and they want to have nothing to it, but they put a lot of pressure on themselves. And I I'll be the first person to say that there's no pressure needed. Like, a lot of times, we think that we have to be good at it. We think that we need to be creative in the kitchen, but you really don't. Like, I mean, I don't look at things as recipes. I look at things as formulas.
Hmm.
And so when I think about what is for dinner tonight, I literally think of it as a formula, and it really has a few components. It has protein of
Hmm.
your choice. It has vegetables of your choice, and then it has fat. And then sometimes it has a starch or something like that, right? But that's it. And so everything else kind of is about the formula of like, well, how do I want to put it all together? Do I want to just stir fry it? Do I want to roast it? But it's not necessarily about like the measurements of things. It's more just about making sure the plate kind of fits that profile of this formula. Um, and I mean, right now I'm on the carnivore diet, so my plate is all animal, but usually my plate would look like, 60, 70% vegetable,
Hmm.
and then, like 10, 15% protein, and then or maybe 20% protein, and then I guess another 10%, 5 to 10% of between the fat and the starch or something like that, if I'm even doing that. But it's usually mostly vegetables. And I find that works really well, but now I'm exploring new ways of doing that. So, who knows? It's always interesting to see what works.
Well, I
But
agree with that. Yeah.
those are two mistakes. The pressure we put on ourselves, and then also thinking we have to figure it out on our own and not going to someone that's a professional.
I fully admit I am not talented in the kitchen, but I can make a sheet pan of vegetables, put it in the oven, right? I can make my protein, so I can do what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, one of the best ways I've found that really moves the needle in terms of health is meal planning.
I yes, agree.
And
Agree.
that's kind of part of what we're talking about here. So a lot of people think meal planning is so hard, and I'm like, well, no, it doesn't have to be. Like, you could simply just get a subscription to a culinary magazine, Bon Appetit, whatever, and then you get that once a month, and then just go through that and do the recipes in that. Let that be your meal plan.
Hmm.
Or you could simply, subscribe to any of the thousands of meal plans out there that are available either for free or at a very low price. But you don't have to put pressure on yourself to figure it out. But what I love about meal planning is that it really helps you stay on target in terms of what your health goals are, because you create a grocery list and you don't diverge from that. And
Hmm.
then hopefully it also helps support ease, so there's no decision fatigue of like, oh, what are we going to eat tonight, right? So you already know what you're going to eat. You've hopefully already prepared for it, and you've also managed your week so that maybe you did a slow cooking meal or a pressure cooking meal on the day that you knew you were going to be really busy, so you started that in the morning, things like that, so you can really budget the time of your week based on how crazy it is with your meal planning. And then lastly, you can really, it saves you money in a sense. Like, you're not like stuck eating out all the time. You're not buying things that are going to go to waste. Like, so
Hmm.
meal planning really supports lack of, like, you have less waste when you meal plan. At least I
You're
hope you
less
do.
likely to diverge, and then give in and eat unhealthy, like eat out. I totally agree. My husband and I on Sundays, we meal prep, meal plan. Like that's what we do. Decide what we're having for dinners, and then I usually make salads for the week for lunch, at least at work. So just fewer oxalates now, but still I'm a meal prepping that. I think that's huge, very helpful. You have to set aside that time on your weekend or whenever that is for you, but that's what we do.
Yeah,
So
and one thing we also do is we do leftover lunches. So we always cook
yeah,
more of our dinner than we need, and we use the next day's lunch is the leftovers. And
yeah,
we change it up. So let's just say dinner was roast chicken. Well, for lunch it might be as chicken salad, or it
right.
might be a tortilla, like a Siete Foods tortilla wrapped with the chicken and vegetables. You know what I mean? It's like you can change it up. You don't have to feel like you're always eating the same thing. But I think creating less work in the kitchen is always going to be to everyone's advantage than creating more work.
Agreed. So a lot of my listeners are females, and what tips would you have to them who are coming to see me, right, as a patient, and I'm recommending some diet changes, and they go back home and their partner maybe is not on the same page?
Yeah, it's frustrating, that because that is definitely a theme I've seen. Now, this is just, of course, my perspective. I can't speak for every male out there. I don't know every male, of course, but in my time, my 16 plus years, I have noticed that theme, that a lot of the drivers of health in a family or in a couple is the female.
Mhm.
And typically I can think of like a handful, like typically it's the male of that relationship or of that family that's kind of poo-pooing the idea or resisting it. And it's frustrating to me because if anything, what's the other statistics? The other statistics are that men die earlier than women. So if anything, we should be on board with our
Yes.
health just as much as a woman should be, right? I mean, so there's really no good reason why we should be undermining an effort to get healthier from anyone. But I think, in my observation, that I think a lot of times it is connected to a few things. It's connected to fear, fear of change, fear of like, oh, what if what I am doing is negatively affect my health? So what's going to happen if I have to stop that? And so that could be something as simple as the enjoyment of going out for a beer for many men or something like that, whatever it is, right? Whatever that ritual is that men have, whether it's connecting with other men, maybe connecting with their child, maybe it's even connecting with their spouse, right? That they might have to lose that way of connecting. Um, and then the other way is sort of what I just mentioned, which is I think in the cases I'm thinking of, the fathers were using these unhealthy tools, whether it's getting desserts or things like that, to connect with their kids. And when the idea of losing that maybe they didn't know how to relate to the kids, I don't know. But
Hmm.
I have observed that a lot over the
Yeah.
years, and it's concerning to me. And what I always think about is, and in the few women I have counseled through this, I'm always trying to give the male perspective. Okay, first of all, the male is wrong. If the male in your life is saying that I don't believe exactly what you and I said earlier, if they don't believe that food affects their health, they are wrong. And you just need to know that they are wrong. And I'm not telling you that you have to shame them around that, but you just need to know on a certain level they are wrong. Food does affect our health. It's the first thing you should always look at. And because of and just having the confidence to know, okay, they are wrong, and it's not my job to make them know that they're wrong, but it is my job to take care of myself. And so how can you best do that? And I always try to kind of mirror back to women their strength. Women, I truly believe this, women are what make the world go round. Women are strong, innately strong. I believe that's why women have baby, that they have the constitution they are able to have babies, because whatever created us knew that women could handle it. And I think I know that as a male, I typically look to the females in my life to help not just ground me, but kind of help tell me what is needed in a situation. And I think in many ways, a lot of women are sometimes made to believe that they don't have that power in a relationship. And so I'm just here to say that I think you do. And I think that you should if you need to kind of do really primal things to get back that power, then do it. And one of those primal things might be like hold out, don't give sex to your partner until they observe what you want them to do, because many men are driven by sex, right? So we're very physical creatures, right? And um and so right away, if you want a man to change his ways, then stop giving him the stimulus that he's wanting, right? So give him something different until you get what you need. And that's a very simplistic thing I'm saying. I know that that can be hard, but I'm more just trying to support women in knowing that you not only are you not crazy, you are correct that food matters, and two, you have more power in the relationship than you realize. And so I'm just trying to mirror back to you to explore the different power dynamics and how you can not shame your partner, but kind of support them and saying, okay, you may not believe this, but give me 2 weeks. Just give us 2 weeks. Let's do this for 2 weeks, and then we'll reevaluate. But commit to it for 2 weeks, and let's see what happens, because a lot can happen in 2 weeks. We do this thing. We used to do this thing called a sugar control detox, and it was 14-day sugar control detox. We would cut out anything that was actual sugar. We cut out alcohol. We cut out things that converted into sugar in the body quickly, like pastas and starches. And so you were mostly just eating protein, vegetables, and fat, right? But in 14 days, people not only lost weight, but they also changed their palate, and they lost, health ailments that have been chronic disappeared in 14 days. I used to do this. I used to run this program in my meal delivery service in Los Angeles. And people would say, this is miraculous. I'm like, no, it's not. It's just food. It's just food. But convince your partner, give me 14 days. And if things don't feel different, then we can reevaluate. But if they do, I'm going to ask you then to re-up another 2 days or 2 weeks. You know what I mean? But take it one step at a time with them, because it's usually just based around fear, and they just need some support. They need some hand holding with that, whether they know it or not.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I think women make the world go round. So thank you. Thank you for giving a shout out to all the females. But you're right. And they're doing the grocery shopping usually for the family. And this is where kids come in. So what are some lessons learned when cooking for picky eating children?
Oh yeah. So I have 2 girls myself, but I've been doing this now for a while, with other families, and I found there's a few things that really move the needle. And one is include the kids or the picky eater in the process as much as possible. So that means grocery shopping, that means the cooking, that means the tasting along the way. What does a bell pepper taste when it's not cooked? What does it taste like when it's cooked? What does it taste like when it's roasted? What does it taste like when it's fried? Change it
Sure.
up. Let them explore it, because a lot of times picky eating is really just, and I was a picky eater, absolutely, and I still am to a certain degree, but it's usually based around, once again, fear. It's lack of control. So something's going on, and I need to feel, something that's going on in my life, I'm overwhelmed by it, so I need to get some kind of control. What can I control? I can control what goes in my mouth. And I've found that a lot of times when parents are having like a tumultuous relationship, how do the kids react? They react with picky eating. They're a lot of times connected. But so first off, connect them to what you're doing, let them participate, give them that control again. Give them the control of, like, here, why don't you pick the vegetable for tonight's dinner? And you can pick from this area, whatever you want. Give them choices that you're going to be okay with them making. You know what I'm saying? So set them up for success, not failure. That's one thing. The second thing is only bring into the home what you want them to eat. And I know that seems like very simple, but how many times as a practitioner, how many times in my career have I heard a parent say, I just don't understand why my kid is addicted to Cheerios? It's like, well, Cheerios,
Buying them, right?
yeah, right. It's like Cheerios don't grow on trees. They're not picking them as flowers. It's like you're bringing them into the home. You're the one that introduced them, or someone in your life did, and you contributed to it by continuing to buy them. And so that's the first rule, is like, set the standard that you want. You are the one in control. So set the standard that you want. Don't bring it into your home. I know, and I speak as someone who, if it's in my home, I will eat it. Like that, like, we have to know our limitations. I have learned that I do not have self-control around mostly like ice creams and certain chips and certain foods. So I can either bring it to the home and then fight myself and beat myself up and like, oh, and struggle, or I can just not bring it home, and then I don't have to struggle. You know what I mean? Like, choose the simplest path. Don't choose the path that's hard and stressful and that's going to keep you in your head and keep you kind of in that pull tug. Like, the simplest path is don't bring it in your home. And then you could say, well, what about when I do want to eat something? Well, here's the tip to when you do want to eat something that's not an everyday, something that's a treat, is you simply go out, you buy it, no matter what size it is. It could be a single serving, it could be a family size, whatever it is. You buy it, you eat the amount you want, and then you throw the rest away. You do not bring it home. And you can say, well, that's a waste of money. It's like, well, it was already a waste of money, because the minute you're buying something that's not for your health, it is a waste of money. It's extraneous. It's not needed. You're not buying it to survive.
Right.
You're buying it because you're addicted to whatever it gives you. You're
Right.
you know, it's a pleasure, it's a comfort thing, it's a pleasure point. So it's already an unnecessary item. So don't bring it into the home. And then the third thing is once again, give the kids the option. So this is a really cool trick. Instead of like plating the meal for your family, what you do is you have like, you know, a separate table or an island in your kitchen, and you put all the food there, and you only, like, let's say you only don't cook multiple meals. I guess that's another tip, but this is part of this. Don't cook three different proteins, and one that's dino shaped for the kids and one that's, you know, for the adults. It's like one for everybody. But then when it comes to the vegetables, have something that you can always pull out. So for our home, it's cultured vegetables. We always have cultured vegetables in our refrigerator because they don't go bad. You can just kind of keep it in the back of the fridge, and it doesn't matter if someone eats it every day, it will not go bad. That's just the nature of cultured vegetables, right? But if you have it in there, what we do is every time we cook, we put whatever vegetable we did make, whether it's a salad, it could be chard, it could be broccoli, it doesn't matter. Whatever we made, we put that out in a bowl, and then we put the cultured vegetables out. And then we tell the kids, you choose, give them the control. You pick what you want from this meal, but you have to choose one of those vegetables. You get to choose. And because we have this mainstay of the cultured vegetable, it's very safe. It's like they know what it tastes like, they know what it looks like, they know what they're going to get from it. And so if the other vegetable seems unsafe to them or just kind of new, and they just aren't feeling like they want to do that, they always have a safe zone. And it's always fascinating. Sometimes they go for the cultured veg option, and a lot of times they don't. But it's so interesting because the thing you think that the times you think, oh, they're going to want this vegetable versus the cultured veg, they don't. They actually go for the cultured. You know, I can never predict what they're going to do, but I find though, by giving them that option, they eat their food. And by doing it that way too, is by leaving it on the island and basically advising them to take the food themselves, you're not only giving them the power, but you're also encouraging them to not food waste. So you're basically saying, only put on the plate what you're
Yeah.
going to eat.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one thing that as parents, we all can relate to, is that shaming of like, you need to finish everything that's on your plate, but we're the ones that serve them in those circumstances, right? We're pushing these foods. And so instead of like having a nice, relaxing meal, you end up having a very stressful meal. But by letting the kid choose what they put on their plate, it's their portion sizes, but it's a win-win for you. So they're choosing what portions, and you've chosen the food options, right? And as long as and they're never getting away with anything. They're never like, oh, but they didn't have a vegetable. No, because the deal in your house is they get to choose which one, but they have to choose one.
Right.
So they're always eating food that you want them to. They get the power, and then they have to finish the plate from the food that they ate. So they're being taught to not, or that they chose to. So they're being taught to not waste food, to respect, you know, the process of food, from the growing to the buying to the sourcing, everything. And I think it's a win-win when you include children in those ways.
I love that. At the time of this recording, I have an only 2-year-old, but I'm kind of doing that right now, and that I'm offering him, if he's not going to eat the vegetable that we prepared, we usually have carrots. We just always have carrots in the fridge. I'm always saying, would you rather have carrots? Right. So I have another substitute that's still a vegetable. He gets to pick one. And I think all of your tips are going to be very helpful as he ages. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and you know, that kind of speaks to another thing, which is palate. I think as you'll find, and you've probably already seen, is any parent with a kid will recognize that one week the kid only wants green things, the next week they only want
Yeah.
white things. You know,
Right.
another week they only want red things. One week they love carrots, the next week they don't want to have anything to do with them. And so
Right.
I think palates I look at palates, it's like breathing creatures. You know, like that we have to never assume that because you didn't like something one week, that you're not, or at one age, that you're not going to like it ever again. And that, so as a parent, to constantly be putting things in front of kids, even when you think that they didn't like it last
Yeah.
month. Why would I do it again? Like, don't ever assume, just keep putting stuff in front. And then also kind of what we talked about earlier, which is try different things. Like, so let's say right now you might be putting out raw carrots. Well, I guess if they're two, maybe you're cooking them slightly. I don't know. But try doing it different ways. Like, so sometimes grate the carrot, sometimes cook it, sometimes roast it, because caramelizing carrots is going to bring out the sweetness in them, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
there's lots. Sometimes you could even coat it with some kind of cheese or something, like, or fat, like, because there's if you stick to kind of that dry texture, then the kid's always going to expect things to look like that. Like, how many kids love sauces, right? But my kids love sauces because from day one everything has had a sauce.
Hmm.
So
Lucky kids.
it's all what we it's all what we acclimate them to. Is
Right.
we are driving the truck. We are the ones driving it. And never forget that you're the one in the driver's seat. So it never has to be what they think they want. You can dictate it, but just give them choice within it.
Yeah, I love that. I've always been a dipper. I love sauces, but again, I fully admitted to not being highly talented in the kitchen. So when it comes to even sauces or seasonings, I feel like that's my weakness, and that's part of what you've created. You're the inventor of Pluck seasoning. So tell us what inspired you to create that seasoning, and tell us what it's all about. We want to know how we can use it, of course, as well. So yeah, so tell
Yeah,
us.
no, thank you. So, I mean, organs are, to me, nature's superfood.
Yes.
Animal organs. I just feel like nature had delivered this amazing source of nutrients. I mean, organs, like, if I just focus on bovine organs, cow organs, vitamin A, B, C, D, E, and K, right? All the vitamins, essential minerals, iron, calcium, copper, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, zinc. I mean, everything, like, if you're trying to get pregnant, it's all in the organs. You know what I mean? It's like you need a prenatal pill, just eat organs. It's all there. And technically we used to, as a society, we used to, our great grandparents did, in generations before that, they ate organs, but for whatever reason we've lost the taste for them, we've lost the cooking knowledge, and so nature's superfood is getting lost on us. And it's sad to me because 35% of the world is nutrient deficient. I mean, that's only the people they've measured, right? And yet we know in the US it's not because it's a food problem. It's not because we're not getting enough calories, because we have an obesity issue in the US, right? So to me, it's like quality. It's all about quality. So here's nature providing you with this incredibly nutrient dense product. And what's also super cool about it is that organs, the nutrient in organs, it's a whole food. It's a real food. And so our bodies recognize it and can assimilate the vitamins and minerals of it, versus like fortified, packaged foods in the store. Most of those vitamins get washed down, washed out of our body or not utilized because our bodies don't know what to do with them because they're not whole. They're synthetic. So to me, that's the gift nature's giving. But the issue is, like, people aren't eating it. And that's when I started to really think about, well, how can I get nutrients in my kids without it being a fight? How can I get things, how can I help people with their health where they don't have to adopt a new habit like we talked about earlier? And I was looking at the way collagen was being used in so many things, and I was already experimenting with like collagen and nut butters and things like that. And then it hit me like, well, wait, nature's superfood is not even being used. And I feel like there's got to be a way to incorporate that. Oh, well, freeze drying organs nowadays, which is something that's prevalently done in the supplement industry. I'm like,
Mhm.
well, that's all shelf stable. So they're freeze drying and powdering organs, and it's shelf stable. So all I need to do is offset. I need to complement or offset the flavor that people make the icky face with when they eat them. I got to somehow complement and offset that flavor. Well, when I make pates, what I use like onion, I caramelize onions, and I use different spices and herbs. So I was like, well, what if I did that with spices? And so that's how Pluck was created. Is I thought, well, I want to get this nutrient density in people's diets, but I also want to offset the taste. And so I do that with the complementary herbs and spices. And so basically, and I know you haven't tried Pluck yet, but when I get you a sample, I think you'll find this to be true. The feedback we get is that A, does not taste like organ meat, and B, it's easy. Like, you don't have to know how to cook. You can you can put it in the recipe, or you can just finish the product with it, just like you would salt. Like you have it, and it goes with anything, like popcorn, eggs, fish, chicken. Doesn't matter that it's cow organs. Like it just goes with everything. And I didn't know that when I created it. I mean, I'm constantly discovering this, but it really does. It goes with everything. And so it's kind of a win-win. It's easy to use, and you're basically adding nutrients to everything you put it on, nutrients that you weren't getting before.
So it's basically freeze-dried organ meats from cow, you're saying, right?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
there are also seasonings in there to make it taste better.
Yeah. So organs have this umami. Are you familiar with the umami?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for those that are not familiar, so umami is what they call the fifth flavor, the fifth taste. So we have sweet, sour, bitter, and
Salty.
salty, right? So umami is the fifth. And what umami does, they're all unique, but what umami does is actually make all the other flavors taste better. It heightens everything. And the way you see that play out in packaged foods in the grocery store is that you'll see a lot of packaged foods have natural flavors added to them. And usually what's hiding in those natural flavors is MSG. And MSG is the industry's synthetic way of adding umami to whatever, the packaged good, to make it taste, better. But technically it's not good for you in that form. But organ meats, it's natural. It's totally natural part of the
Very
organ meat.
cool.
So what Pluck tastes like is it has an umami focus. So when you put it on something, and in umami, the best way to describe umami is savory. It's got a savory taste to it. And I put smoked paprika in there too, so it's got a little bit of a smoky thing, but it's kind of an all-purpose seasoning, so it doesn't taste that different from most all-purpose seasonings. But I've included 5 organs in it. I've included liver, kidney, heart, spleen, and pancreas. And so you're not just getting one organ, you're getting 5.
Yeah.
And there's this concept of like supports like, and that's why I did all 5. And the idea is, it's an ancestral kind of Native American thought, but it's if I eat, animal organs, then they're going to support my own organs. And if I'm eating those 5, then I'm going to be supporting those 5 organs in me. And each organ has its own identity. Like there's certain heme iron and liver is not found in other things. There's the enzymes in the pancreas that aren't found in the other organs. So they each
Right.
contribute in a way that's going to give you even more of a full-fledged nutritional profile from them. So that's why I'm trying to get much variety. It's all about variety in my opinion.
Are there any contraindications? Like, is there garlic in your seasoning if someone has
It's not, yeah, it's not AIP, but we're actually and I'm working on an AIP version right now. Actually, I'm like literally weeks away from debuting it. So
exciting?
yeah, so our goal is to make it more accessible for people that have certain sensitivities. I just kind of wanted to launch though with
Yeah.
with a kind of a general standard, since sadly, I mean, I don't mean to offend anyone, but the AIP community, while I completely support and respect them, when you're trying to sell a product, it's a small community, I mean, you have
And
to
that's the autoimmune paleo for those listening.
yeah.
AIP community. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of that's now they can do garlic, but they can't do seeds. But just to your point,
Yeah.
that I will be creating product that can serve a lot of different palates and a lot of different health needs.
Well,
But we
yeah,
started with,
very creative idea. Yeah, you got to start somewhere. Yeah.
yeah,
Get your product out. So
but
how
it is,
liberally can it be used? Does it contain salt at all, or is it just seasoning?
yeah. So it has salt. So we advise you just to use it like you would salt and pepper. I mean,
Okay.
in many cases, you don't even need to add more salt. Sometimes I do, because I purposely didn't add too much salt, because I
Yeah.
I was aware that everyone's kind of got their own palate around salt, depending on your adrenals and whatnot. So you're going to have different needs around salt. So I didn't want to do it too salty. So
Right.
it doesn't have as much salt as most products, but it has enough where you could get by with just using Pluck. Um, we've heard from families that kids love it. Like, I haven't met a kid yet that doesn't, to be honest with you. It's really intriguing. I think kids are really in tune with their bodies. And I think when they taste it, because it does taste good, that they immediately know what their body needs. And I think they're getting nutrients that they previously weren't. So I think there's kind of this, this quality of like wanting more of it. Like I hear kids like actually sticking their fingers into the jar and eating it, things like that.
Very,
My
very
kids are like that.
yeah, very exciting. Well, I have to ask you, you have obviously quite the experience and you've given us several tips today, and I'm excited to use your Pluck seasoning. But tell me, what would your top longevity tip be? Of everything you've shared with us, or maybe something you haven't, what's your top longevity tip?
Yeah, you would think it would be like organ meats, just eat organ meats. And I think that I could easily say that, but if I really reflect on what has been the thing that moves the needle the most for me personally and what I've experienced in my journey on this planet, I would have to say it's sleep. And I say that as a notorious night owl. I think if you had talked to me 2 years ago, I would have, we would have had this conversation at like 11 at night because I would be up. But now I go to bed like, 8:39.
Me too.
And it's amazing. It's amazing how different life looks when you get sleep.
Mhm.
And I say that even as a parent, like we have, our kids are 7 and 4, or sorry, 8 and 4. And I don't I out of all the kids families we know and where we live, I think our kids go to bed the earliest to this day, even our 8-year-old. And I'm just like, yeah, because they're better people when they do. And I noticed that in myself. So I just believe a good night's sleep, it helps. Here's why it's so important for longevity, in my opinion. So one of the biggest issues we have with health is the choices we make, right? Particularly around food. When I get a good night's sleep, I make better food choices. It's just a fact.
Mhm.
So if it starts on the simplest, most base level um, around health is what we choose to put in our mouth. And if I make better choices when I get sleep, then that's got to be the first marker for me, because every choice I make is going to be based on how well I slept. And I think that's so easy in our lives, particularly when there's so many factors against us, where we have these big food companies that are creating products that actually like feed our addictions and or play with our like our brain, and our addictive qualities, like they're actually manipulating us and manipulating our flavors. I think that when we have so many things against us, we really have to dig into the things we do have power over, and we have our choice. We do. No one is force feeding you to eat whatever it is you're eating and shaming yourself for eating. No one's doing that. No one is doing that to you. You are choosing to do it. So best way is to use your own skills around making the best choices you can make, and that's sleep for me.
Most, I feel like literally most, meaning a third of all of my guests say sleep, including the interview I did earlier today. He also said sleep, so you're not alone there. Tell us, I know you have a special promotion for our listeners to try your seasoning. So tell us about that.
Yes. Yeah. So the site is Eat Pluck, EATPLUCK.com, and we have created a special 10% discount for your listeners. It's Dr. Gray 10, and I'll let you kind of share more about. I don't know. It sounds like your listeners know the spelling and everything, but you can order. We sell on our site. We sell Pluck in pouches, and then we sell it in tins. And we actually chose that because we really wanted to kind of not just be about helping people with their health, but also focusing on the planet. And I didn't see plastic containers as an option. And so that meant glass, but to me, glass is heavy and it potentially would break. So meaning that I would have to put more shipping material around the
Yeah,
glass to protect it.
yeah.
So we're now using these pouches. And what it means is we don't have to use any, we don't literally don't have any protectant, like any superfluous like protectant in the bag, because the pouch is can't break, and it's its own protectant. And then it's lighter, so there's less fossil fuels to ship it to us and for us to ship it to you. So I
Sure.
felt like it was a win-win for right now.
Sounds like it. Exciting. So I can't wait to try your seasoning. So to the listeners, I will post the link. You need to use a special link in the show notes to get the 10% off. Again, the code is Dr. Gray, DRGRAY 10 for that 10% off. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This was very interesting. I'm sure my husband's going to enjoy this episode a lot. So thank you for your your passion and really helping our listeners learn that it is easy. It can be easy to cook and eat well. And again, I look forward to trying your amazing seasoning.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.